Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vinyl Power. That's right, the podcast where we talk about our love for vinyl records and share it with you. Join us each week as we bring you the latest in vinyl releases, what's in our vinyl collection, and wrap it up with epic vinyl. That's right here, each and every week, with your hosts, the Reverend Jeff Kelley and Kurt Harris. Once again, welcome to Vinyl Power. Hello, everybody, and welcome indeed to the first ever Vinyl Power, the podcast. I am one of the hosts of this inglorious fashion of a podcast, the Reverend Jeff Kelley, and with me over there is Mr. Kurt Harris. How are you today, sir?
I am doing great. Thanks for welcoming me. You are friendly neighborhood music man, Kurt Harris, coming live from the sound room, joining the Reverend Jeff in the first ever Vinyl Power, and believe me, it's going to be a blast.
It's going to be a blast. That's right. We're going to take our love of vinyl records and we're going to savvy that into a podcast for your love of podcasts. That's right. Two wrongs don't make a right, but two rights make another right. I think that's how all that goes. I'm not really sure. Hey, speaking of things that are not really sure of, I don't really know who all these people are, but we're going to talk about it. Apparently, the new release calendar has been hit, and the re-releases are set. Goldfinger has a double re-release coming up with Coconut Ass, live from Omaha, and Stomping Ground. And those are both, all of these will be released tomorrow, September 8th in 2017. That's right. Along with Limp Bizkit, Significant Other, Matchbox 20, Yourself or Someone Like You, which is a killer the album. I don't care who you are. You don't have to like Matchbox 20 or not. Just listen to the album because it's great. Mazzy Star, So Tonight That I Might See. And Papa Roach also has a double re-release in Infest and Love, Hate, Tragedy. I don't know a whole lot about Papa Roach, but I know a lot of people like him. So there you have it, folks. That's what's going to be re-released on vinyl for this week. Join us again next week when we'll talk about the re-releases for next week. Look at that. Just like that, you are in the know. Hey, Kurt, I got a question for you. Hey, what's in your vinyl, man? What you been listening to this week?
Well, you know what? It's been an interesting week with vinyl. Really an interesting last 2 weeks. Obviously, we've had a great new release, at least in my neck of the woods, and that would be the first one that I would show here amongst my vinyl collection. I've spent a lot of time listening to the brand new Steven Wilson record, To the Bone. And I must say, everything he puts out is different. Never puts out the same record, and this one certainly qualifies. But it's a triumph. It's one that people should certainly search out and give it a listen to. It's roughly 2.5 weeks old, so a brand new record. I
tried to get a copy today. Unfortunately, my store was sold out of them. So he said there'll be more in. He said there'll be more coming in. It's just a matter of they've been sold out. But
this particular vinyl, made in Germany, and excellent sounding. Obviously, for those that know me, they know I'm a huge Steven Wilson fan. So this would come highly recommended. So I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks with this particular vinyl. So that's the first one I wanted to show. Another one from one of my favorite bands from the past, although they are still playing. They actually still play live quite often, and that's Blue Oyster Cult.
Yes.
And here we have the vinyl, and this is an original vinyl. This is not a repress, of Tyranny and Mutation. And this is from 1973. Great record.
Reverend was born here.
I think most anybody would be able to to enjoy this. It's hard to put Blue Oyster Cult in a genre.
It is. You're right. It's rockish, it's folkish, it's orchestral. It's kind of a little of all of it. I have that album in my collection as well. So yeah, for sure. Blue Oyster Cult is just their own thing.
I would certainly agree with that. They definitely are their own thing, and this was certainly during their heyday, obviously the 1970s. Another album I've been listening to, and you know what? It's from the same year, which makes it easy for me to remember. And that would be the first ever Queen album.
Ah, yes, absolutely.
So this is the first time you get to hear Brian May on guitar, and obviously one of the best frontmen in rock history with the late, great Freddie Mercury.
I still don't have that one. I have a lot of Queen in my record collection, but I don't have that one yet, but I'm looking for it.
It's well worth having and listening to, and just another great album. And obviously, I think the Reverend Jeff here just recently went through a lot of the music from 1974, and he found quite a bit of it to be maybe not what he had hoped for. Maybe if he steps back to 73, he may find a little more that he likes.
Oh, 73 was much better. I totally agree with that. I started listening to the top 100 hits of every year of my life, starting with the year that I was born, because I wouldn't be familiar with that stuff, of course, which of course I was familiar with a lot of it because I'm a classic rock kind of guy. And 73 wasn't bad, but boy, in 1974, y'all really had some crappy taste in music. That's all I can say. All the rock was at like the bottom 60, and all the crap was at the cream of the top. It was crazy. 1974, not so much.
I certainly hope Billy Don't Be a Hero was not from 74 then, because that certainly would have helped to drop the bottom out. And the last one that I have for you this week, and what I've been listening to, is maybe one that people don't know quite as well as those more mainstream classic rock albums, and that would be Jaw Wobble, featuring the guitarist from U2, The Edge, and the Invaders of the Heart Band, and this is Jaw Wobble's Snake Charmer. Again, it's a record that I would find hard-pressed to fit in any kind of a genre. Jaw Wobble's an amazing bass player. He's known for his super deep dub bass type of notes. It's just a fun record. It's 1983. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of Jaw Wobble playing with a lot of different people. Bill Laswell, another great player. But it's one I certainly highly recommend if you ever want to delve into something that is entirely different. This would be the one for you. Now, that's the four I've been listening to over the last week to 2 weeks. And I just have to ask, Reverend Jeff, what the heck have you been listening to lately?
Yeah, I got some epic stuff in my vinyl. Matter of fact, I hit the store today, and picked up some really strange things, such as Tony Basil's Word of Mouth. Now, you'd think to yourself, why in the world, Reverend Jeff, would you have bought Tony Basil's Word of Mouth? Because it has, hey, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey. That's why. That's right. One hit wonder, Tony Basil, is now in the old collection to go along with, of course, my favorite exchange, Tommy Two-Tone. Now, Tommy Two-Tone has a whole bunch of records, but he's considered a one-hit wonder. I wonder why that is. Well, because the only thing he had worth of shit was Jenny, I Got Your Number, 8675309. Now, when I was in high school, the funny thing is what brings me up to that record was we had the exchange of 867. We even had 53, but we didn't have anything in the zeros. The phone company just like wouldn't give them out no more. Because people would get that number, and then every goober in the world just starts friggin' dialing that phone number when they're drunk listening at the friggin' bar to see if anybody answers. And of course, they would have to get rid of that number. So we had in Deal, Maryland, they have the 8th, and probably still do, is the 8675, I believe. But the 309, unfortunately, you just can't get anymore. But then we were cruising, we were just rocking out to this one, buddy. The best of ZZ Top. 1977, the old Reverend was 4 years old. Tush, Waiting for the Bus. Jesus just left Chicago. That's one of my favorite. People don't know it, but listen to the lyrics of Jesus just left Chicago, because my God, those guys can be a whole lot of fun. ZZ Top was one of those groups who my parents never approved of the long-haired and the long beard hippie look. You should clean shaven and cut your hair short. You should be a businessman. Dress for the job that you want. Those guys wanted to be long-haired, long-bearded hippie freaks on the stage. Guess where they got to be? So I guess it is true, just for the job that you want.
One interesting thing about ZZ Top, Reverend Jeff, and that is you're so used to the long beards, right, of the guitar player and the bass player. But did you know the name of the drummer for ZZ Top, who has no beard? His name is Frank Beard.
Frank Beard. The only guy named Beard has no beard. Wrapping it out for what I was listening to today, though, was Whitesnake. Now, everything I thought was American is British again. Apparently, back when I was a kid and I listened to all this stuff, I didn't really care where they came from, but I automatically assumed anything that was rocking came from America. Well, now as an adult, I'm going back and re-engineering my old record collection, and I'm reading about all of this stuff. And Whitesnake, this Whitesnake album was amazing. I mean, it really, really was. It went 8 times platinum, and even brought their crap of a record before this one up to double platinum just from the, tag-along sales that went with it. But honestly, this might as well have been their best of album, because there's like 5 out of 10 songs that went top 40 on it. So that's what I was listening to in my collection this week. So I got to ask you there, Kurt, what epic vinyl did you bring us this week?
Epic vinyl. Well, for the first ever show, we had talked previously, and we decided, go for it. Bring out your most epic vinyl for the first show. And for me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to present my all-time favorite record, the very first Black Sabbath album, with a cover that still strikes a little bit of creepy fear into me to this day. And this album came out in February of 1970, actually February 13th, 1970. And it is 38 minutes. The album was actually recorded in one day, in one 12-hour recording session. The band really had no idea what they were doing. And they got on, and they basically played live. They put Ozzy in a separate room, of course, for vocals, and the rest of the band just jammed for roughly 12 hours. There's almost no overdubs except for a dual guitar part in Sleeping Village, a little bit of Finger, and the Rain and Thunder, which opens the album with the very, very fearful opening track, Black Sabbath. So you've got Black Sabbath, which the name, a lot of people wonder, where did the name come from? What is the band about? Well, the name, they couldn't think of a name, and they happened to be watching the old Boris Karloff movie, Black Sabbath, and voila, they had a name. So most people would probably know the second album much better, Paranoid, because obviously you've got the hit songs Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs. It was hit after radio play after radio play. This album was not an album loaded with radio play. It's just raw. They didn't hardly know what they were doing. A lot of the guitar parts where Tony Iommi is jamming and riffing were off the cuff. They weren't written down beforehand. There's something just about that. The raw, organic nature of this album has just always kept a great attraction to me. So many great albums that I've listened to that have much better production values and other things about the albums that would certainly put them over this one. But for all the years, this one has maintained its spot as the #1 album for me personally in my collection. It's one that I've probably listened to 500 times. And while I'm in no way a great guitar player, I've played guitar along to this album because mostly it's pretty simplistic to play to. And so I would say overall that this would be for me my most epic vinyl record. And of course, just to give a little bit of information on this record itself, this is not an original. If you had an original, there were actually, this is one of the albums where there was two. There was a UK version and a US version. In my opinion, the US version is far superior. They actually cut off one of the best parts in the US version, in the UK version, and they add the song "Evil Woman," which was the single released in the UK off this album, and it went to number 8 in the UK. I mean, that's not bad, and it actually reached number 23 on the Billboard charts. That's kind of surprising when you think about how raw this album is for a band that kind of came out of nowhere and made what is known as the first heavy metal record. I would more say Paranoid might be more of a heavy metal record. This is more of a kind of a gothic hard rock album, but it is known as the first heavy metal record. So overall, I would say that the 38 minutes contained on this album, and this is the Rhino reissue. I believe it was 2015 that Rhino reissued this album. It was not expensive. You could still find them in the $20 range new. And it sounds spectacular. It sounds just as good as the original that I had, which was an original US gatefold. So I could not be more pleased with it. And that's pretty much what I want to tell you about this record. And then I have to ask my man, the Reverend Jeff here, what epic vinyl do you want to show to our fans today?
That's right. Well, the old Reverend here decided he was going to break out the big ones.
I see where you're going.
And we brought Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast, to the house. That's right. Iron Maiden for me was the first real heavy metal band that I was introduced through my cousin Joey. My cousin Joey's a couple of years older than I was, so at a young age I was getting introduced to a lot of this stuff, and I was liking it and enjoying it. Now, unfortunately for me, I had a Methodist mother who was liking to play stuff backwards and break records in front of me because they were devils and demons. And, you know, Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast is literally the quintessential record that all parents pointed to just because of the lyrics in the Number of the Beast itself. Iron Maiden actually took on the nickname The Beast and was that was in a couple of their later albums, Visions of the Beast and Best of the Beast. This one originally came out in 1982. The old Reverend here was 9 years old. The Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills. It was number 1 on the UK album chart. It reached top 40 Billboard 200. And it also went, the original 45 of Run to the Hills was released right before the drop of the album. It was kind of strange. It was recorded in January and February of 1982. And then Iron Maiden went on tour with it. And they didn't release the actual record until after the British dates were done. So they dropped the 45, they went on the British tour, and then when the British tour was done, they dropped the album to the world. And back then, that was the smartest thing in the world they could do, because they were selling albums at the tour. Stuff that wasn't available in the stores. And at that time, this was at a time when bands were getting screwed by the record labels. I mean, they would produce album after album and make nothing. The tours were where they made their money. Merchandise, sell the t-shirt, sell the hot dog, get part of the house. That's where you're going to make your money. Boy, I just straight up, if it wasn't for those boys in Compton, these fellas and everybody that has their own record labels now would still be getting screwed by the people who were running the record labels in the beginning. It really, really was a bum deal for musicians until like the mid-90s, before people started opening up their eyes and realized, well, hell, I can get records printed. I can get CDs made. That ain't too damn hard. So, but the Number of the Beast, the Iron Maiden, Eddie, that mascot, you know, that's the guy. Killers was the original album. This was the follow-up to it. There was a live album in between. It just reminds me of those times as a kid before everything went to shit. And now every time I sit down and listen to anything Iron Maiden, that's exactly what I'm listening to, is those times before it went to shit. That, my friends, is exactly what we've brought to the table for you in the very first edition of Vinyl Power. That's right. The sad music means it's time to go away. Kurt, you have anything you want to wrap up with for this edition, sir?
I just want to wrap up with we couldn't have brought two better records to the table for the first ever Vinyl Power. And I want to thank everybody that watches and get on board and subscribe. And we're going to bring you great content every week. So thanks again. And thanks to you, Reverend Jeff.
And we will be back next week. If you have an epic vinyl of your own favorite in your collection, why don't you email us at vinylpowercast@gmail.com, and we can put you in the beginning of one of our shows to come in the future. We can feature you right here on Vinyl Power. Thanks so much for being here this week. We'll see you next week. Join us at facebook.com/Vinyl Power. We'll see you then.